An important event was taking place in a large skyscraper with many guests, and there were many journalists. Everyone gathered for the Korea's Greatest Businessman Award. The host announced the participants. The heroine of the evening was a successful businesswoman who earned an income of 100 million won in 2017. She helped raise Korea's prestige in the world. Out came a thin slim and a woman in a red modeling dress. The presenter called this successful businesswoman a young talent of the financial world. The woman acted confident, she was young and looked beautiful. Her name was Lady Oh Sunhwa. She was the head of Sunhwa Industries. Korean media described the past business presentation in great detail. Lady Oh Sunhwa's picture was almost on the covers of every major publication. From the newspapers, people learned about the successful businesswoman and her financial accomplishments. The lady was showering in her apartment after work. She had a beautiful young body. The businesswoman looked after herself and kept herself in shape. Oh Sunhwa was resting after her shower and recovering from a hard day. Her personal secretary came up to her and praised her boss for doing so well today. The supervisor tiredly called Min Ji's secretary by name. The girl informed the supervisor that she had an acupressure session in 20 minutes. Sitting motionless, the lady indicated that she was aware of this. The secretary happily continued talking. She congratulated her for reaching the 100 million won sales mark. The girl added that she was extremely excited right now. The businesswoman somehow detachedly told that all the money she earned was simply numbers. The secretary froze in bewilderment. Somewhat tiredly, the woman said that there is no difference between 10 million or 100 million won, they are just numbers that disappear as soon as someone reaches them. The lady said instructively that the real important thing is the ability to get back on your feet, no matter what difficult situation a person finds themselves in. The secretary expressed full agreement with her superior. The girl went on to say compliments for the lady. She has always been around the boss and knows her too well. The lady was able to comprehend the highest degree of thinking and strength. Nothing and no one has taken her off the right path. The saleswoman recalled that she had previously planned to reach the maximum sales volume. At that time, she had planned a sum of 100 million won. She had put a lot on the line to achieve it. The secretary timidly inquired what her boss had sacrificed. The lady replied that she had staked her right to repay someone. The secretary kept repeating the words she had just heard from her boss. The supervisor requested that the secretary schedule a board meeting for tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. At the appointed time the meeting was held. The board of directors was held in a large skyscraper. The directors were surprised by the president's decision to leave her position for 6 months at a difficult time for the company. The lady and the board members were sitting around a big table. A number of directors told the presidentess that in order to increase sales, the management of the company must be united under her charisma and focus. They did not understand how she could step down at such a time. Calmer said that she fully understood that her request was an impracticable request. Someone on the board jumped up in surprise. The president reiterated that she will personally overcome the challenge, no matter what it looks like. She confirmed that she would do it in the name of sophistication. There was complete silence at the table for a short time. Suddenly, angry reactions were heard from various leaders towards the lady. The president said she could not give a reason for her action, and she does not expect the board to understand. She rose to her feet and asked the director's permission to fulfill her request. The presidentess asked for only 6 months of freedom and no more. After the meeting, the excited participants began to disperse. They certainly could not realize what had just happened and what the president was thinking about. Some of the directors didn't understand why their supervisor would show such weakness. A gratuitous request for vacation would worsen the company's image. One of those directors noticed that the lady herself had willingly shown weakness. He thought the board could take advantage of this. The current situation could be a good opportunity for board members to fire the supervisor who has been called a ghost. Oh Sunhwa was sitting at home, she was resting after the past directors' meeting. Amidst depression and apathy, she surveyed her surroundings. The lady with a heavy mood sat on the floor with her back against the wall. Once again, she examined various documents without much attention. It was very difficult for the presidentess to focus on anything. The woman was having a difficult time, suffering from mood attacks. Oh Sunhwa felt lonely, even though she was young and beautiful. As she contemplated the surrounding reality with a blank stare, she thought about being allowed to die. She saw no point in living on. With the TV running in the background, the woman heard the main characters in one of the movies talking about parting with their lives. The girl turned around sharply, she was interested in the words she heard on the TV. It was surprising to the woman that the TV was broadcasting the same thing she was thinking about. Standing, she concluded that most people die in unconsciousness. The lady got to the point that it all happens when a person thinks it's the end. That's when the opportunity to start life with a clean slate arises. Speaking to herself, the woman concluded that true strength does not lie in the ability to never fall. True strength is the ability to get up again and again, no matter what. It became hard for her, depressing thoughts caused the lady to cry. She sat on the floor, practically disconnected from the reality around her. In the background, the television continued to run. Then the woman heard the announcer announce that the original author was Nam Kwon-chol. The next day the lady was driving to work, she kept thinking about the information she heard on TV. The lady kept repeating and repeating Nam Kwon-chol's name to herself. A secretary came over to the lady and gave her a clipboard with detailed information on Kwon-chol. The secretary said that Kwon-chol won a manhwa contest when he was 17. His debut work was called Cherry Blossom Trembling Petal Season, and a TV series would be made, but the author Kwon-chol disappeared and vanished without a trace. The girl informed her boss that Kwon-chol had no more successful works. He turned into a forgotten author who sporadically releases short stories. The secretary wanted to add something else, but the presidentess stopped her. The secretary obediently fell silent. She would have liked to say something else, but realized that the lady had learned what she wanted. The secretary asked the lady what kind of debt she might owe to the author of the manhwa. The social status of the president is very high to be able to socialize with Kwon-chol. Min-ji told her boss that it was very relaxed to take a 6-month vacation without the approval of the director's light. Here, the girl offered to provide anonymous financial assistance to Kwon-chol. The president was surprised by such a continuation. The supervisor told Min-ji that she didn't need any more information. The secretary apologized. The lady said that it is only because of Kwon-chol that she is in her position, for this reason he is so important to her. The president said that she was very much shaken by the words of the author of the manhwa. Thanks to him she was in the position she is in. She stood up and said sharply that she thought Nam Kwon-chol was a worthy person. The secretary listened to her superior with great attention. The lady remembered that, in view of his social position, the writer could not be near her. The president said she would do it for him. Riding in the car, the lady thought that she would give Kwon-chol everything he needed. She wanted to make an incredible person out of him. Manhwa author Kwon-chol had an unpleasant conversation with his female editor. She reminded him that she has told him many times but he doesn't understand. The writer sat in deep thought. He answered nothing to the editor's remarks. The editor clearly and explicitly said that they are now trying to create an erotic adult manhwa for men. She repeated separately that the manhwa should be erotic. The writer replied that he understood. Kwon-chol said that in order for the readers to be more affected by the erotic story, more sensual scenes would need to be created. The editor was perplexed and embittered. She grabbed the writer by his clothes and started shouting at him that his main assignment was to improve his drawing. For further the issue would go on to draw erotic scenes with boobs. She clarified that they didn't want his storylines. The editress advised the writer to draw gay scenes if he wanted to touch the readers. Kwon-chol left the building and walked by himself down the street. He was annoyed. Publishers had once again rejected his story proposal. He decided that he would need to make a short-term deal to serialize his work, otherwise he wouldn't even be able to pay rent. When the property owner called him, she asked if he was the one living in the room. Kun-chul was approached by his landlady. She reminded him about the rent that was 2 months overdue. The guy apologized and promised to pay it all back by the end of the month. A weary writer walked into the building of a fast food restaurant. It took him a long time to choose his food. He didn't have much money for food. He picked up the bag of food and stared at it for a long time. The writer eagerly consumed the food with chopsticks. He sat alone. Kung-chul thought the rice balls were very expensive. He pointed out that hot soup would still be better since the water is free. The guy began to sell himself to dreams. He realized that after the successful conclusion of the deal, he would be able to eat enough rice balls and ramen. While eating, the guy was completely withdrawn. Suddenly someone sat at his side. The guy was very surprised to see a young beautiful woman beside him. Lady Oh Sun-hwa suggested that the guy take a rice ball. The writer and the company executive sat looking at each other in silence. To avoid wasting time, the guy quickly finished his lunch. He gave up the rice ball. Suddenly the writer jumped up and said he had to go. Lady grabbed his shoulder and asked him to wait. She asked the writer why he didn't take the rice ball. The guy further wanted to leave. Woon-chul said that he can't take a rice ball from a stranger. Lady was taken aback by his answer. She addressed the writer formally by his full name. Guy was amazed at how she could know him. The woman told the writer that she was perfectly normal and not a suspicious person. The guy didn't know what to say back. He looked at the woman in surprise and thought about what to say to him. She told the writer, then came to him to change his life completely. The meeting ended in nothing. In the evening, the president chatted with her secretary while sitting in the park. The secretary stood next to her boss, who was in a bad mood and was silent. The girl understood what had happened. She said that in the end the meeting did not end successfully. The secretary was telling her boss that the guy ran away from her when they met, and he didn't take the president's word for it. The lady sat and wondered sadly to herself. She didn't understand why the guy didn't believe her. Though she sincerely addressed him, the secretary replied that everything was obvious. If a total stranger appeared in front of a lady and offered to buy her food and then proceeded to change her life, she would be scared herself. The secretary shrewdly said that if her boss offered her help inside the company or in a commercial transaction, people would accept it with great gratitude, but Nam Kun-chul is not a businessman. He didn't believe the lady and ran away. The young girl reported that people in the world don't trust other people easily, for this reason always betray and deceive while they are living their lives. The president, more than anyone else, should know how the world works. The lady felt herself becoming heavy and troublesome. She concluded that if the guy didn't believe her, she couldn't help him although she really wanted to. Here the secretary remembered the ancient Asian wisdom, which says that a man must know himself and his enemy, then any battle he will not be able to. The secretary said that if her boss wanted to get close to a guy, it would first require a detailed study of his environment. Lady Oh Sun-hwa decided to take the advice of her secretary. She decided to follow the principle of knowing yourself and your enemy. Then she remembered the girl's words about getting to know a person first before helping them. The secretary advised her boss to read all the manhwa by Nam Kun-chul. The woman walked around the library. It reminded her of her years of research in the business field. After a day of searching, the lady was resting at her hotel. She was tired and lying on the table, and she wasn't very happy with the results of the search. The secretary came to her. She saw that there was a lot of manhwa lying near the boss. The girl said that the lady herself would sooner or later find out everything. The girl reported that Nam Kun-chul made his recent works erotic for male readers. The president exploded with an overabundance of emotion. She was very interested in the Arrow manhwa. The girl asked the supervisor if the new information made her feel obscene. She continued to speculate that if Nam Kung Chul was no longer the same person, he might have lost his writing nature. Could it be that because of this he lost his right to be saved? The supervisor didn't answer anything. Osun was overwhelmed with emotion, she didn't even know what to answer. That's when the president said that you can't discredit someone because they changed the genre of their work. The secretary thought of how to help her boss. She told her that if the president really felt that way. The girl advised the president to study all the manhwa in detail. This would help the lady to get closer to Nam Kung Chul. A detailed analysis of the manhwa would help the lady to know what kind of women the writer prefers. Oh Sunhwa studied all the manhwa in detail. It helped her to know the guy's tastes and preferences. As she realized, Nam Kung Chul most often draws girls as office ladies, also he women are often drawn with glasses. Lady totally do in office style, she wore a corset to make her waist narrow and her breasts big. She also wore glasses, it gave her the appearance of an intelligent office lady. Such an outfit went completely with Nam Chul's preferences. The secretary told the boss that her current appearance would dramatically increase the writer's sympathy for her. That said, the rest is up to the president herself. Koo Cheol sat in his apartment and practiced drawing. The artist was sketching a picture for the next manhwa. He heard the doorbell ring at that time. The guy didn't want to be distracted from his work, he kept drawing, but the doorbell also kept ringing insistently. The lady stood by the door and waited impatiently for the guy to open it. With irritation and impatience the writer asked who had passed to him. He saw a beautiful and young woman. She addressed him by her full name Nam Kung Chul. The woman asked for some time to talk. The guy stared at her, he thought he'd seen her somewhere before. Various guesses were swarming in his head. Looking more closely, he recognized in the stranger a woman he had seen earlier in the restaurant. Gong Chul rushed with all his might to the door, trying to close it as quickly as possible. The girl resisted, holding the door open. The guy was very agitated, he didn't understand what was going on and what the woman wanted from him. He replied that he had nothing. After calming down, the lady said that she simply wanted to continue. She asked the painter to open the door for her. The guy opened the door and asked irritably what the girl wanted from him. He thought she wanted to lure him into a cult or a pyramid scheme. In the end, the writer said he's doing fine, and let people go, he has nothing to talk to her about. The lady realized that she had to act differently. She told the guy that they probably wouldn't be able to talk. The boy timidly replied that it couldn't be helped, he wanted the woman to go away. Here the girl tore at her blouse with all her might. Not far away on the first floor of the building stood a secretary. She watched in amazement at the actions of her boss. The secretary appreciated such a move of the president. The guy was discouraged, he did not know what to do. Standing near the door, the lady said she needed an atmosphere where they could talk to each other. The woman yelled to the guy through the door that if he used it he had to pay. She also yelled that she wasn't going anywhere until he paid her back. The guy was very surprised. He asked the woman what he had done and if she was in her right mind. Lady Oh Sunhwa shouted back at him that he couldn't call himself a man if he didn't pay the woman back. The writer asked the woman to come in for a minute. She objected and told the guy that he could try to get her for free again. The writer asked the woman to keep her voice down and come inside. The woman said her voice was always like that. Quite frightened, the guy asked her to keep her voice down or the neighbors would misunderstand. Lady Oh Sunhwa sat at the artist's house. She was ready to socialize. Kung Chul sat opposite silently and motionless. After a short period of time the guy gathered his thoughts and began to speak. He spoke uncertainly. He could not understand why this woman wanted to get to him so much. The guy decided that the girl needed his money. He clarified that he was not personally interested in religion and had no extra money. He could not buy anything. The woman was silent in response. The guy said in the end the woman was wrong if she thinks he has money. The woman addressed him by his full name Nam Kung Chul. She refuted the guy's fears that she needed money. the lady said she was interested in his work, she came to help him. The woman openly proclaimed that she wanted to be a good fit in the guy's life. Kung Chul sat silent, he looked at his interlocutor in surprise, there was a long and silent pause, the woman was also silent and looked at her interlocutor. After a little thought, the writer said he was completely right. He asked the woman if she wanted to convert him. Oh Sung-hwa jumped to her feet, she was ready to answer the writer very sharply. The woman replied firmly that she didn't want to convert the guy and didn't want to sell him anything. She described herself as a devoted fan and reader of Kung Chul. Guy was perplexed. He couldn't believe he had a fan. The lady opened up, she said the artist's work gave her courage and self-confidence. The guy's mood improved dramatically. Ono was pleasantly surprised that at least someone appreciated his work. He asked timidly of the woman about her unusual taste, why she liked erotic manhwa. The lady immediately denied erotic manhwa. Oh Sun-hwa told the artist which of his manhwa she liked the most, it was The Season of Trembling Cherry Blossom Petals. The lady recalled with details that there were only 3 volumes in the guy's novel, but even this volume was enough for readers to get a lot of emotions. This masterpiece showed the human nature of its author. The woman said that a manhwa from his authorship gave her the strength to move on with her life, for this reason, she came to see him now. She asked the writer if there was anything she could help him with right now. Guy was silent in response. Here he replied to the woman that he no longer wrote anything like that. She was puzzled. The writer revealed that he simply struggles daily just to feed himself, he can't find a proper job, because of this he is forced to draw erotic manhwa just to survive. He replied to the woman that she was wasting her time. Thinking back on his past works, Koen Cheol explained that at the time he was just lucky, he was young and had good thoughts in his head, he was involved in a major project that intersected with the theme of his work. At the current moment, the author can't think of any interesting plot. Because of this, he asked for the lady to leave. Oh Sung-hwa said excitedly that she was sure exactly how she felt when she read the writer's works. The guy replied to her sharply that he couldn't write such things anymore. Gong Chul became very nervous, he didn't understand the woman's insistence. The writer decided that the woman's arrival and request showed that he was an accomplished bankrupt writer. For the umpteenth time he told her to leave. The guy rudely and loudly said that he doesn't need anyone's help, he uses the remnants of his talent to make a living somehow. He roughly closed the door in front of the woman, she was stunned. The girl stood and stared in surprise at the closed door, she had expected a different outcome. The writer decided that the woman thought he was an accomplished writer and so she decided to help him. The lady was very tense, her hands were even shaking with excitement. She-na didn't know what to do now. Lady realized that the reason for her failures was her ego. Oh Sung-hwa felt that her tactlessness was the reason for the conflict with the writer. The president was very upset, she realized that her wrong actions had hurt the author of the manhwa. Lady Oh Sun-sua sat in the inn in the evening, she pondered the events of the past day. She was resting on the couch and she was very sad, a good endeavor ended in nothing. Her secretary came over and offered her boss a whiskey on the rocks, the woman replied that she was perfectly fine. The secretary examined her boss very carefully, she was concerned about the president's condition. The secretary noted to herself that the boss looked very broken, she had never seen her in such a state before. The girl recalled that the boss had faced difficulties before, but she had never lost face before, nothing had taken her out of her rut. The lady often said that true strength shows itself not in never falling, but in the ability to rise no matter what. The boss wasn't called the ghost president for nothing, she could always hold her own, but at the current moment the woman had a very simplistic expression on her face. The secretary looked at her boss and wondered how to help her. It was very unusual for a secretary to look at her boss and see her in such a state. Here the girl began to speak, she remembered that she had previously suggested to her boss that she use business tactics. The secretary floated the idea of contacting the publisher and asking that the writer be given a draft. The woman responded with a flat refusal. As the presidentess said, the author's work is her sacred thing, she can't take control of it. The secretary agreed with her boss. The lady said dreamily that she did not want power and wealth but wanted to turn into a common man. She wanted to go back to the obscurity that was before Manhwa Industries came into existence. The president expressed her desire to help Kwon Chul become his support and source of strength and help him create another great work like his masterpiece Cherry Blossom. The secretary named Min Ji listened to her boss with great interest. She liked her suggestion. Min Ji agreed with Sun Hwa's thoughts. She was ready to help the presidentess with everything. The secretary said that if her boss is willing to go that far, she'll come up with a new plan, and that plan won't go against the president's wishes. Nam Kung Chul will get help. The boss said she's counting on Min Ji. Suddenly the secretary announced that something had occurred to her. She suggested to her supervisor that she use the woman's weapon. Kwon Cheol was sitting in his office chatting with one of his editors. The editor asked the guy how he could have gotten to such a low state. He asked the writer how he got to the point of drawing erotic manhwa. The guy said there is a lot of competition in this area. The editor confirmed this and added that almost every business does things this way. The editor added that things are gradually shifting to digital works. The level of consumers reading classic manhwa has dropped sharply. An author can't become popular if he doesn't present his content for free. Guy was surprised by this information. The editor said he had some overseas customers, also they had orders from China. Thanks to this, they were able to survive. He asked Kwon Chul directly if he was willing to work for China. A guy was walking sadly home. He was contemplating a proposal. He went on to write a romance novel aimed at women. Earlier, the editor clarified that the contract requires the writer to write either 25 or 50 chapters, with 2 chapters to be released weekly. He asked Kwon Chul if he could handle the job. The writer confirmed that he could. Now the guy was thinking about how he could give away 2 chapters each week. He calculated that there are 8 pages in each chapter. There would end up being 90 sections within the 2 chapters. Pondering the scope of future work, he somehow felt as if the doors to hell had been opened to him. As he approached his apartment, he even considered calling his editor and telling him he couldn't do the job he'd applied for. Just then he heard a young woman approach him. He looked up and recognized the lady who had visited him before. He looked at her long and hard, not understanding what she wanted. Oh Sunghwa greeted the writer. She called him by his full name. Kwon Chul asked irritably why she came again and what she was up to this time. The lady replied conciliatingly that she came to ask something. The guy was surprised at this turn. He asked her again what she wanted to ask. Lady Oh Sunghwa inquired if the writer needed a free housekeeper. He was very surprised. Kwon Chul stood and stared intently at the woman in front of him. He kept having the recurring thought that she had come to be a free housekeeper. Here the writer said sharply that he did not need a housekeeper. The lady reiterated that she could work for free. She recalled the mess in the guy's room. She offered to cook him food. The guy replied that it wasn't about that. The writer clarified why the woman was bothering him in this way. She doesn't even know him well. He threatened to call the police. The woman unexpectedly agreed to even call the police, a response the guy didn't expect. Oh Sunghwa said that if the guy calls the police, she will tell the law enforcement officers that she is his fan and came because she wants to help him by becoming his housekeeper. At that, the lady was ready even if she was arrested. A floor below stood her secretary. It was hard for her to hear this conversation. The guy once again asked the woman earnestly to leave. The lady decided to try her luck one last time. She asked the guy to trust her. She said she just came to help the guy. The writer listened to nothing and just closed the door. The woman was left alone. Lady Oh Sunghwa was very much distressed. She stood at the door and didn't know what to say. Then a secretary came up from below. She saw her boss sitting on the floor. Min-ji looked at her superior with regret and concern. She approached the president and suggested she return. The lady responded with a flat refusal. Oh Sunghwa said categorically that she would stay here until she was accepted by the writer. The secretary said it was illegal. Her boss was surprised. Min-ji clarified that illegal harassment is punishable by law. This information upset the president. The lady said definitively that she would stay and would not leave. The woman clarified that she would sit until the writer saw her. The receptionist was upset by this response. The supervisor sternly told the girl to come back. The presidentess strictly said that her instruction was an order. Min-ji was obliged to obey. It was raining late at night, and Kung-chul was sitting in his apartment working. He realized that it would be too much for him to produce 2 chapters a week. He could use a staff to do his work, but he didn't have any. The writer sighed heavily. He was gathering his thoughts about the job. To think better, he decided to smoke. It would help his creative thoughts. As he smoked he remembered meeting the lady. Now he realized that she was really nice. He gathered his thoughts and realized that he had to hurry up with the drawing. He had to do it any way he could. Gradually, the drudgery of the work led him to fall asleep right on his desk. Kung-chul's awakening came quite unexpectedly. It was already light outside. The writer was passing into himself. He realized that he would have to finish the work. The boy yawned and gradually passed into himself. He was unaccustomed to the fact that he had fallen asleep. Kung-chul went to the window. He saw the cloudy weather outside the window. The guy was surprised that it was already morning. After standing around for a while he made the decision to go to the convenience store to get some food. He put on his cap and got ready to go get breakfast. He opened the door and walked out of the apartment. Behind the open door something caught his attention. The writer was startled. He was so surprised that he even completely forgot why he had come out. Right outside his apartment, he saw an exhausted and sleeping lady Oh Sunghwa. 2 women were walking down the floor toward Kung-chul's apartment, talking about something. One of them was very surprised to see the writer and a young woman beside him. The women stood nearby and discussed in wonder at what they had seen. The writer at that, walked over and held out his hand to the unconscious lady sitting there. At the same time, the women standing nearby were discussing Kung-chul's life. They recalled that earlier this week there was a lot of noise coming from his apartment. Suddenly a voice was raised by Lady Oh Sunghwa. She was repeating the writer's name through her delirium. The woman was sick, she was almost senseless, but she kept saying she wanted to help the writer. The writer decided to take the woman to his home. She was beginning to come to her senses. She heard lying there the kettle boiling on the stove. She was also beginning to hear little by little the muffled noise from the television. But she didn't have the strength to get up. She lay there and felt the soft mattress beneath her. The woman was very exhausted, had no strength to get up, and continued to lie there. The lady felt a sudden surge of strength. She was able to open her eyes. Feeling better, she got up and sat on the bed. The surrounding reality was unfamiliar to her. The lady felt an intense pain in her head. It bounded her consciousness. Suddenly someone's voice inquired about her standing. She was very surprised. The woman was pleasantly surprised to see writer Nam Kung-chul standing next to her. The guy started to explain to the lady that she was sleeping outside while she had a fever. He took her off the street so she could rest. Then suddenly the girl stood up and jumped off the bed. She bowed to the writer. The lady apologized, expressed her regret and said she didn't mean to impose herself in that way. Kung-chul was embarrassed. He said there was no need for him to apologize. The woman once again said she was sorry. The guy remembered that the lady had already been disrespectful to him. His mood softened, he smiled and decided to turn the conversation to a positive note. He bluntly asked the woman who she was. For a short while, Lady Oh Sunghwa was confused. The writer inquired what his guest wanted from him. He inquired also where they had previously seen each other. The woman was embarrassed, she wanted to answer the guy in a way that would please him. Oh Sung-hwa got excited, she had to be sure to choose the right words so that the writer wouldn't be offended like last time. She bluntly told the guy that they used to date. The writer was very surprised. The woman said the guy probably doesn't know her personally. Koen Cheol sat back and waited for further information from the guest. The lady was completely frank in saying that she was also previously acquainted with Koen Cheol. The writer was silent. Kmo was gradually becoming interested in his guest. The woman told the writer that his work once helped her a lot and betrayed more strength for life. The lady indicated that she wanted to help the young writer by any method possible. The guy asked the woman seriously if it was true that she was a fan of his. She hotly confirmed it. The lady said a couple times confidently that she was a big fan of Kung Chul. The writer thought he was really pathetic. The guy said his thought that if his fans' words are to be believed, he is so broken that he needs help to find his own path for himself. The lady said sharply that she wasn't here because she felt sorry for the writer. Oh Sun-hwa added that she has a great desire to learn from the writer how he can be helped to create new masterpieces. Embarrassed, the guy said that he was currently busy creating an erotic manhwa. The writer said that for this reason he could not be the kind of person a woman might consider an idol. The lady said that, it absolutely doesn't matter if the guy is drawing an erotic manhwa right now. The woman added that she wants to help the guy in any way possible. This is all because she believes that he can create masterpieces that will be better than the past ones. The writer was flattered by such words. He suddenly had an interesting idea. Koen Cheol asked the woman out of the blue if she could draw. The woman was surprised at such a question. She even queried the writer about it. The guy reported that at the current moment he needs an assistant to work. If the lady likes manhwa, she could probably help him draw. Oh Sun-hwa said confidently that she could paint. She was agreeable to the writer's suggestion. Koen Cheol clarified if she had experience in assisting a mangaka. Lady replied that she wasn't sure if her qualifications were enough to be an assistant for a professional. The woman said if she wasn't good enough to be an artist, she was willing to learn. The guy said he couldn't force the lady to be an artist. He suggested even forget the conversation. Emotionally, the lady asked for a chance. She was willing to do any job. She was willing to do laundry or fetch coffee. The guy was surprised by the girl's persistence. He decided to give her a chance if she was so insistent. The writer placed a piece of paper and a pencil in front of her. The woman prepared to show her talent. Koen Cheol asked her to draw something she was sure of. The lady sat looking at the guy. She was aware that she was in for a big test. The woman was very anxious. The pencil was shaking in her hands. She realized the importance of this moment. The lady sat down and began to think intently about what she would best represent with pencil on paper. Her thoughts were jumbled in her head due to excitement. She realized the importance of the upcoming test and wanted to perform to the best of her ability. The guy continued to wait. The lady sighed deeply for courage. Calmly she began to draw. On a piece of paper she drew the first line. Gong Chul watched her drawing attempts carefully. Gradually the excitement left the girl. The writer began to wonder and marvel. The woman drew very beautifully and exquisitely. Gradually, neat outlines and an image of a young beautiful girl appeared on a piece of paper. The boy looked at the finished drawing with an unbroken gaze. The image interested him. The lady couldn't tell if she liked her drawing. She timidly apologized to the writer. The woman started to make excuses. She said she may not have the talent to draw a manhwa. She had never drawn something like this before. The woman said frankly that she wanted to help from the bottom of her heart. She promised that she would work hard on herself. She felt sorry that she had lied to the guy before. The writer clarified with her if she had realistically never drawn a manhwa before. There was a long pause. Kung Chul sat and scrutinized the drawing. The guy noted to himself that the woman had a design flair. She was able to convey the feelings of the female character with lines. The writer observed that the woman was able to create a good drawing by relying only on her natural talent. Kung Chul thought deeply. He realized that he was about to face a momentous decision. He told the woman she was accepted and specified when she was ready to start work. The woman was extremely surprised. She couldn't believe the guy hired from her. The writer specified that the woman would have to go out every week or even more often, until the time of the project's end. He wouldn't be able to pay her, also she would need to stay overnight sometimes. He asked the lady if she was satisfied with such terms, and she replied with a cheerful assent. To himself, the guy wondered if she could realistically do it. He remembered that he was in a desperate situation right now. Kung Chul cheerfully replied to the woman that they had made up their minds on that. Only now the guy asked the woman what her name was. She hesitated a bit and decided to give her name. She hesitated. She wanted to give herself a foreign name for conspiracy. A short pause began. The woman was silent. Guy didn't understand why she wasn't saying anything. The woman said her name was Swan Duck. Guy was very surprised. Already quite confidently, she confirmed that her name was Swan Duck. In the evening the lady was sitting in her hotel room. She was discussing with her secretary the events of the previous day. The first person who decided to start the conversation was Minji's secretary. The girl checked with her boss where she came up with the name Swan Duck. The presidentess replied that it was once the name of her dog when she was a child. Lady was passing on memories. She told the secretary that her dog was very faithful. Minji pointed out to the boss that taking the name of a dog was unwise. There are far more appropriate names for a presidentess. The lady excused herself that the name Swanduk was the first name that came to her mind. The woman remembered that there was a program on TV about Manhwa clothing brand. The secretary guessed that her boss was scared. If she said her real name, the guy would immediately guess that she was the owner of the fashion brand. The lady told confidently her assistant to call her from today's Swan Duck. The girl was surprised. She didn't want to call the presidentess like that. Oh, Manhwa sternly repeated to the secretary to address her only as Swan Duck. The girl said she didn't want to do that. The presidentess told in a nonchalant manner that she has to get used to her new name. She has to learn to respond naturally if a guy addresses her as Swanduk. For the woman's labor came as an assistant manga writer. He addressed her by her made-up name, Swanduk. The guy beckoned Swanduk to come over to him. She responded obediently. In doing so, the woman tried to act as natural as possible. The author asked the woman if she had seen the manga manuscript, as he called the final manuscript, and she replied that she had not seen it yet. Kung Chul happily decided to show his assistant the manuscript of the project he was working on. The woman was very surprised that she was given the opportunity to see it. She looked at the pictures of the manhwa and realized it was the manuscript of a professional. With excitement, the lady thought that the manhwa titled Cherry Blossom also appeared in the same way. Guy said that nowadays, artists no longer create drawings on paper like they used to. Suinduk asked why this was so. The author told her that people use the computer to draw, but he himself is not used to using it yet, so he only uses the computer to add tinting and other adjustments. He advised the helper to learn how to do it herself. This will help her to correct her mistakes. The woman agreed with him. The guy asked the assistant if she knew how to use a computer. She replied that she knew a number of office programs. The assistant clarified where she needed to start. The guy told her that if he were an office worker, she would help him a lot. Kung Chul said that he uses photo work in his work. The assistant immediately guessed that it was a program for graphic work. Kung Chul explained to Soongdak that she should be able to correctly determine which layout she would be working with. After that, she should take that bitmap file. The assistant wrote everything down. The author pointed out to the woman that he had just explained the concept of channels to her. Here the assistant admitted that she was sorry. In reality she only understood 70% of what she heard, although maybe she only understood 50%. Then she bowed and apologized to him. She promised that she would master all the knowledge she needed before the next day. The guy said it was okay, he didn't require the woman to do everything in one day. The author asked his assistant to help him with the cleanup for the day. He suggested that she start gradually exploring the channels. The woman answered him in agreement. The woman sat down at the table and began to gradually clean up the sketches with an eraser. She felt that it was in reality very difficult. The lady had previously assumed that the process would be easy because it was a normal eraser cleanup. On the sketches, you had to erase the pencil marks that were under the lines in the drawing. She exerted an unexpectedly excessive amount of force, causing the paper to crack and tear. Part of the drawing ended up tearing. The helper was very frightened. The guy heard the sound and wondered if the assistant had accidentally torn his drawing. Suandaku fell to her knees and apologized profusely. She felt she had ruined a very precious manuscript. The assistant decided she could not repay this with money. The lady was in great shock. She was even ready for the writer to hit him or punish him in some way, but only if he would keep her on the job. He said he would not hit her. The writer pointed out that his assistant had made a common mistake. As for beginners, the drawing should be taped and then scanned. At that time, the fate of Kun Chol was being discussed in the editorial office of a publication. One of the rank-and-file female editors was talking to the editor-in-chief, and he was listening to her silently and smoking. The girl asked her to forgive her, but she didn't understand why Kun Chol still needed to be kept at work. She decided that Kun Chol no longer had any merit. Also his manhwa had a poor sales rate among adult publications. The editor said that she doesn't believe that Kun Chol will be able to produce 2 chapters weekly with an assistant. She asked that the proposal be withdrawn. She wanted to introduce the editor to a respectable newcomer. She asked the editor-in-chief for permission with interest. But the editor-in-chief was silent and did not react in any way. He only smoked. That's when the editor-in-chief told the girl that her job was to supervise and look after the author Nam Kung Chol. The editor-in-chief told the female editor bluntly and clearly that his decision about Kung Chol was final. He added to the woman that if she had any complaints about the decision, she could use her time to create better content than Kung Chol. The editor was very upset. She didn't expect such a response. She didn't believe that Kun Chol could create anything normal. She thought like this. The editor-in-chief decided to learn how to turn rocks into diamonds. The editor decided that if the author didn't meet the deadline, she would resign. She decided to call Kun Chol. An unexpected call distracted the author from important work. At the same time he was creating a sketch, he picked up the phone and asked who was calling him. An editor named Nain Ken asked how far he had gotten in his work. The guy replied that he was busy with work at the moment. The girl confirmed to him that this is what he should be doing. Here she asked about the current progress and how much he had accomplished. He replied that he was almost done drawing the first chapter and was already putting the final touches on it. Such words angered the editor. She was not satisfied with the speed of the work. On the phone, she told the guy she was going to his house right now and demanded everything was prepared for the meeting. Kun Chol was unpleasantly surprised. At the same time, his young assistant was sitting at his home. Naeon Ken entered the writer's apartment. She also apologized for the intrusion. Kun Chol greeted her politely near the entrance. He addressed her as Editor Na. The editor went into the apartment and saw a mess. She noted to herself that it smelled like a lonely man's place. Looking at the scattered dishes, she sensed that the scent belonged to a third-rate manhwa author no one would want anything to do with. Here the editor was very much amazed. She met his assistant Soundduck. The editress turned to the guy with a mute question. He realized he hadn't introduced his boss to his assistant yet. He explained politely that since he had the norm of turning in 2 chapters weekly, he had hired an assistant. The editor was surprised by the word assistant. In her opinion, the most appropriate word would be apprentice. Naeon Kyung continued to stare at Kun Chol's girlfriend with great attention. The editor noted that Soundduck is an incredible beauty. She couldn't understand how this girl could become a writer's assistant. Sounduk introduced herself to the editress. Thea somewhat confusedly responded with a greeting. The assistant behaved emphasized modesty. She indicated that she was assisting the writer in his work. She told the editor that they should get along from now on. Naeun Ken hurriedly replied that she was happy to meet her too. Koen Cheol motioned for the editor to take a seat. He pointed out that he didn't have a couch, but she could sit at the table. The writer offered the editor a cup of coffee. The lady volunteered to serve the coffee herself. The editorialist apologized for the possible hassle. Sonduk replied that it was her duty to brew the coffee. Naeun Ken sat down at the table and began to study the author's finished drawings. She said sternly that the writer should realize that she doesn't understand how the story in the manhwa will progress from here on out. The editor kept asking the author why the protagonist was doing this and not the other way around. She didn't understand what the writer was getting at. Koen Cheol didn't understand how to explain it to him. Guy said that instead of rationalizing the main character's actions, he decided to try to bring his feelings and emotions to life. The editor was surprised by this answer. She asked him rudely, if he has nothing to say, does he always resort to being emotional and sensual? She added that he should end it. Kung Chul was surprised by this response of hers. He realized that he would have to change his work pattern. The editor asked sternly how long he will stay in one place. He may have been famous in the past, but now he needs to fight for a place. She demanded results from her before trying to revitalize emotions and feelings. Results will affect the money the author receives. The editress said that if he couldn't do his best, he would be known as a loser. She even suggested to him that he should admit that he was worse than a rookie who was paid less. The author was very discouraged. He kept asking to be changed. Koen Chul said that he never saw himself as some special or amazing person. The editor asked him why he didn't understand her words. Also, the editor reminded him that she had told him this information before. He should have realized everything and corrected all the flaws. It was then that Sounduk intervened in the conversation. She had heard Koen Cheol and the editoress chatting before. The assistant said timidly that she didn't mean to eavesdrop, but she realized that the author and the editor were arguing over the third chapter. Here the lady began to tell me that because of her work, she was able to read the story completely. She went on to say that the more she read the chapter, the more she felt like she was being forced to ponder the emotions of the characters. This is when editor Naeun Ken got tired of listening and interrupted the kunduk. She began berating the assistant, telling her that she had no right to stick her nose where it didn't belong. The editress called herself the person in charge who had the right to have a conversation with the author. Sounduk apologized. The lady began to say patiently that she fully understood that she could not interfere as she was only an assistant. Sounduk pointed out that Gong Chul in the manhwa failed to properly convey his feelings. For this reason, Sounduk decided to make it a little clearer. The editor rudely interrupted the woman, told her not to go where she wasn't asked. She wasn't interested in the emotions of the characters. The author has indicated here that there are comments about this chapter. The guy started to say that he was trying to show the deepest features of the characters, because it's not about one emotion but about feeling a storm of emotions at the same time. The editor interrupted him and told him not to repeat the same thing again. Naeun Ken said bluntly that if the author does it the way he wants, the readers won't understand anything at all. Assistant Sonduk raised her hand and wanted to say her word. The lady told the editor that she could understand it. In a calm tone, Sounduk began to tell her that she is not someone who is very much interested in the manhwa industry. She called herself an admirer of Nam Kung Chul. The assistant said convincingly that she understood completely the plot of the third chapter. The editor was surprised. The editor didn't understand how it was a regular assistant who wanted to pick a fight with her. That's when she asked Sounduk rudely if she knew much about storylines. Naeun Ken suggested that the lady herself become a real author and make her debut so she wouldn't be a regular assistant. The editor pointed out that she had an important conversation with the author, so the assistant shouldn't pry. Koen Cheol asked the editor not to worry and calmed her down in every way possible. Here, Sondok responded with a flat refusal to the suggestion to mind her own business. The assistant said she knows what she is talking about, she is willing to elaborate on Kwon Chol's works. Here the lady began to elaborate that the author can convey depth of character and perspective, because of this the readers will wish for more, they won't be able to stop thinking about it. After that the reader has his own impression of how he should feel about the character, he imagines himself in his shoes. Sonduk clarified that none of the readers would be able to see any of this if they were looking at it from one perspective. Nain Ken said that the assistant is talking nonsense, for this reason, amateurs stay in one place. The editor also added that if nothing is clear, readers won't read it. She advised the assistant to stop talking about deep feelings. She also reminded that Kwon Chol's works don't sell well. Toward the end, she asked her assistant if she knew how well the works had sold before. Sonduk was silent and didn't know what to say. The assistant looked at the editress and wondered if that was really what happened. Sonduk here reported that Kwon Chol's hit success was thanks to the manhwa season of Trembling Cherry Blossom Petals. She continued that this series shows the full range of feelings of the characters, making readers think about what is going on. This work encapsulates all sides of both men and women. Suddenly, Sondok had an interesting hunch. She started asking the editor if this was possible. Here the assistant clarified whether it could be that the editor had not fully read all of Kwon Chol's works. Nain Ken started talking fast. She said that it's not what's important anymore. The manhwa world is not the same anymore. The assistant said she doesn't understand her. The lady began to say that regardless of how the world functions, in creating a manhwa, the author and editor must be able to understand and cooperate with each other. She clarified with the editor how she wanted to help the guy when she hadn't even read it, even though she was instructed to keep an eye on the author. Sondok asked the editress if it could be that she didn't like the works of author Nam Kwon Chol. The editress herself was very amazed. The writer was amazed at the conversation that had taken place. He sat silent. The editor was very affected by the assistant's accusations. She realized that Sondok was right. The lady said in the end that the pointless meeting that had just taken place proved that the assistant was right. She added that if that was indeed the case, then removing the editor would be the best solution. Here, Nain Ken's patience ran out. She jumped up and decided to leave. She headed for the exit, followed by Kwon Chol and his assistant. To maximize the effect, the editor slammed the door with all her might. After the editor left, the lady asked the guy if she said anything wrong to Nain Kyung. Kwon Chol was silent and didn't know what to say. Secretary Min Ji was sitting in the hotel room with her boss. She told the president that she made a lot of noise. The girl clarified that her boss had interfered in the relationship between the manhwa author and the editor. As a result, Nain Ken got angry. Min Ji continued to talk. She said that everyone calls Nain Ken editor because they treat her with respect. At the same time, the main point is that the client is an employee of the publishing house. The lady listened silently. The secretary went on to say that the editor has power. She can tell the author what he can and cannot do. If you look at the situation from a different perspective, Nain Ken has the same status as Oh Sunghwa. The secretary added that her boss facilitated in such a way that she could completely sever the relationship between the editor and Kwon Chol. The girl pointed out to the presidentess that while she is at the writer's home, she is not Lady Sunghwa there. Min Ji said abruptly to her boss that her name is now Sonduk. She works as an assistant to Nam Kwon Chol, who is a third-rate author whose works don't sell. The lady decided to break the silence. She asked herself what she should do. Everything the secretary said was true. Oh Sunghwa said she could be fired. The secretary replied that there is no guarantee that such a thing won't happen. The secretary said she was fully convinced that her boss had injured the writer. Min Ji stopped talking. She decided to change her clothes while her boss was thinking things over. The lady sat on the floor beside the writer. She said sorrowfully that she had committed a grievous sin. Remembering the gullible Kwon Chol, she reasoned in her mind that she came to him as an apprentice. at the same time the writer accepted her, due to the fact that the lady didn't even know her place. She got into a conflict with the client. The president said she would accept any punishment, she was even willing to have Kwon-chul deduct part of her salary. The lady was extremely begging the author not to fire her. The writer said surprised that he didn't imagine Swan-duk in that light. He turned directly to the woman and asked if there was anything else she hadn't told him about herself. The lady became nervous, she realized that the author suspected something about her. Kwon-chul looked at his interlocutor with great attention, he waited for her answers. Leiji repeated the question that there could be something she hadn't told about herself, she clearly wanted to keep something quiet. Eventually, Sounduk said that she didn't think there could be anything that the writer in her didn't know, the author insisted that she tell him the truth. The guy thought back to the attitude that Sounduk had towards the editor named Ken, it was not the behavior of an ordinary person, given the confidence that came from his assistant and her logical tone, he drew a number of conclusions. Here Kwon-chul said confidently that he had concluded that Sounduk was a lady from a wealthy family. Such a guess made the assistant very happy, she fully confirmed the author's words and apologized for lying to him. The author said he thought so, he told the woman that she was very beautiful, she gave off the feeling that she didn't need anything. Hearing these words, the assistant was relieved. The lady began to tell a made-up story that her father's business is in decline at the current moment, she came to Seoul to look for a job on her own. Kwon-chul listened to her with great attention. He said he didn't know that and apologized to the woman, the assessor said it was fine. The lady added that she didn't know how to apologize for her rudeness, the writer replied that it was true and she shouldn't have interfered in her meeting with the editor. Here the lad added cheerfully that the conflict that had occurred yesterday had made him much happier. He indicated that he was very happy after editor Na left, he had no time to do anything after what Sonduk told her. The writer told the assistant frankly that all she said to the editor were things he wanted to say himself but couldn't. The guy said in the end the woman didn't need to worry, there was nothing wrong with what she said. The lady sat silent, she was comforted and pleased by such an answer. The woman turned gratefully to the writer, she was pleased that he was no longer angry. Kwon-chul added that he didn't praise his assistant for interfering in his conversation with the director, he urged her to be careful during his meetings with his client, the lady replied that she understood. Here, Sounduk recalled yesterday's event and said that editor Na left in a bad mood. The writer asked if it was okay that he didn't apologize to her personally, he decided he had done wrong, the responsibility for his employees' actions lies with him. The guy decided to call the editor first and talk to her. Editor Nain Ken was sitting at her house in the evening. Her apartment was a big mess, the woman was stressed and didn't have the energy to clean up. Yesterday's encounter with the writer took her completely out of her mind. To distract herself, Nain Ken sat and worked on the computer, she wanted to forget the past meeting. The appearance of the writer's assistant kept popping up in her mind as she wondered if the editor had read Kwon-chul's work. Nain Ken wanted to forget everything, but the unpleasant image kept resurfacing in her mind, she saw Sounduk's appearance for the umpteenth time when she asked her how she wanted to help the writer without reading his works. The editor was very annoyed, whatever she did, there was no way she could distract herself. Most of all, she couldn't understand what was wrong with Sounduk, after all, she was just an ordinary assistant. The editor was very hurt that some assistant dared to lecture her, Nain Ken and the right of the supervisor could choose what kind of work they should do, the editor-in-chief didn't hand her the author of Kwon-chul for her to be a fan. The editor decided to read the writings of the writer, she decided that it would help to expose him, she really wanted to prove that this writer is just a third-rate author. Sitting by the computer, Nain Ken said to himself that Kwon-chul's works were not valuable enough to be sold as books, he was only saved by e-books for sale. In the hotel room, Lady Oh Seon-hwa was chatting with her secretary. Min-ji informed her supervisor that she had found detailed information about Nain Ken and found out where she resided. The girl continued to report that the editor lives in X house, which is not that far from here. It turns out that Nain Ken lives not far from the writer Kun Chul. Min-ji went on to say that the editor had applied a couple of times to a large company for a writing position, but she was instead put in charge of the manhwa department. Then that department fell apart. As a result, Nain Ken is at her current job. This is the fourth manhwa department she's headed. The lady sat silently and listened to the detailed information about the editor. Min-ji said that most of the authors that Nain Ken supervised were women. They couldn't achieve much success, but it can't be said that the editors don't have any talents. Suddenly, Sounduk asked about the editor's marital status. Min-ji replied that Nain Ken's father owns the store. He runs it with his wife. The editor has an older brother. The lady decided to go to Nain Ken and apologize to her. She really didn't want the writer to get in trouble for what she had done. The secretary replied that this was not a good idea. Min-ji added to her boss that even if she apologized, the editress wouldn't accept it. Lady added that she would sincerely apologize. The secretary clarified that an apology would not do any good because of the fact that the editor and the president are at different levels. Because of the influence that Oh Sunhwa has, it would only make things worse. Min-ji proudly said that her boss is a strong and proud person, so she should stay out of it. She promised to come up with another plan. She put forward a philosophical comparison, saying that there is no good if oil and fire go against each other. The president was pleased that her secretary thought of her like that. Once again the lady repeated to herself that this was her mistake and she should not have gotten involved herself. She ended the conversation with the hope that the situation would pass and the writer wouldn't have any problems. At the same time, editor Nain Ken was sitting at her home. She was purposeful and focused on the internet. The woman had previously set herself a goal, to study all the works of authorship of Kun Chul. She persisted and frantically worked her mouse, flipping through many pages from the author's manhwa. She needed to find something to compromise the writer with. Nain Ken thought she found something interesting. It caught her full attention. The editor recalled Kun Chul's words. He was talking about how he was trying to show the deepest traits of the characters. The author specified that it was not only about one emotion but also about feeling a mixture of several feelings at the same time. There was a pause and Nain Ken pondered. She was comparing in her mind what she had heard from the writer and what she had just seen. After sitting for a bit, the editor decided it was time for action. She rose resolutely from her seat. She decided to come immediately to the bookstore. There she hoped to find something important. Even though it was late evening, Nain Ken came to complete her search in the store. While in the library, Nain Ken began to walk the floors looking for something she was interested in. She found and looked carefully through the shelves. She was sure she had seen one of Kun Chul's books being sold here before. That's when she saw it. Her search finally succeeding, she fixed her gaze on the book she had found. On the shelf, among the books of various authors was a book by Kun Chul. Nain Ken gently held the book in her hands. She thought that the book is really old. There are still copies of it on sale. The woman was overjoyed after finding the book she wanted. She held the book in her hands and gathered her thoughts. She needed to do something now. Nain Ken walked resolutely toward the exit and thought to herself that she was only buying the book to familiarize herself with Kun Chul's work. The secretary told the supervisor that the editor had just left the bookstore. Min-ji clarified if they needed to follow Nain Ken. The lady replied that it was fine, that's where they would stop today. Later, the secretary was traveling in a car with her boss. Min-ji reminded the lady that she wanted to see where the editress usually was so she could run into her by chance on the street. Oh Sunhwa thought that such an encounter would seem suspicious to the editress. Unexpectedly, the supervisor said that they needed to stop by the bookstore. Such a request surprised Min-ji. The secretary felt a very close unity with her boss. She imagined the two of them lying on the bed together before going to bed. The boss and the secretary came into the bookstore together. Min-ji inquired quietly as to why they had come here. The lady thought to herself that it had been a long time since she had walked around a bookstore so carefree and free. The secretary asked if perhaps her boss wanted to buy some book or something. Lady Sungwa thought if she had already come here, the secretary was silently watching the presidentess. The lady stood looking at the bookshelf in silence for a long time. She certainly couldn't remember what she needed. She said to herself that the book she needed was probably not here, as it was very old. The woman said she wanted to purchase another copy of the book to add to her collection. The receptionist clarified which work she was referring to. The lady said that she wanted a book by Kun Chol called Cherry Blossom Petal Fluttering Season. The receptionist said that the store probably doesn't have copies of the book since it was published a long time ago. Min Ji said that copies would not be lying around the entrance. She decided to ask if they had such books in stock. The supervisor thanked her. The lady agreed with her subordinate. The book she needed was probably not reprinted. The secretary turned to her boss calling her president. She said she was discouraged by the situation. The lady reminded her that she should be called Swan Duck. The secretary repeated her boss's new name to herself. The lady said the book she wanted was probably not in the store. Minji reported that there was only one copy of volumes 1 through 3 left in the store. The girl added that they had just been sold. The seekers had no idea that the books they needed had been purchased by the editor. She was on her way home at the time. Nain Ken went up to her apartment. She wanted to start reading as soon as possible. The editor was lying on the bed looking at the books she had bought. She was really looking forward to this moment and was ready to start reading. Nain Ken put her hand on the cover and prepared to study this book by Kun Chol. She realized at that moment that familiarity with the work could seriously change her attitude toward the writer. She remembered the words of Sonduk, who had asked how an editor could help an author create a work if she hadn't even read his work. After reading, the editress leaned back on the bed without strength. She admitted defeat to herself. Nain Ken thought that Kun Chol was also in reality an author who showed a comprehensive palette of feelings. She thought to herself for the umpteenth time that she had screwed up.